Thanksgiving dinner started the same way it always did. The table was too small for the number of plates, the turkey smelled a little dry, and the TV murmured football in the other room. I was sitting near the end, close to the kitchen doorway, where the light was harsher and people passed behind me every few minutes. My name is Mara. I'm 29. Halfway through dinner, my older brother leaned back in his chair, laughed, and said, "So, are you still doing that little internet thing? Or did you finally get a real job?" I didn't answer right away. I kept my fork steady, took a slow sip of water, and looked down at my plate. My dad cleared his throat and said, without even looking at me, "Let's not embarrass the family tonight." A few people chuckled. My brother smiled like he'd landed a clean hit. Across the table, his girlfriend reached into her bag for her phone. She said something about a podcast she loved for long drives, tapped the screen, and let it play. I recognized my own voice before anyone else did. I didn't explain. I didn't react. I just sat there and waited. I grew up in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio, the kind with identical mailboxes and streets named after trees. My brother Ryan is 3 years older than me. He works in corporate sales, wears button-downs even on weekends, and always has a story ready about quotas or bonuses. My parents adore him in a very public way. They like jobs that come with offices, supervisors, and titles that make sense at dinner parties. Ryan fits neatly into that picture. I never really did. After college, I moved west to Spokane, rented a small apartment, and started working alone. I spend most days with a laptop, a microphone, and a notebook. No coworkers, no dress code, no one to introduce me as anything impressive. To my family, that means I don't really work. They say it gently sometimes. Other times they laugh. They've suggested banks, offices, just something stable. When I tried to explain once what I actually did, my dad waved it off and asked when I planned to apply somewhere real. So eventually, I stopped explaining. That Thanksgiving, Ryan brought his girlfriend Lena for the first time. She was polite, observant, asked careful questions. Every time Ryan talked about work, my parents leaned in. Every time I spoke, the room seemed to brace itself. When Lena finally asked me what I did, I took a breath to answer. That's when my dad cut in with the line about embarrassment. I didn't argue. I didn't correct him. I just nodded slightly, like he'd said something reasonable. A few minutes later, Lena pulled out her phone. She said, "This voice always calms me down." And then my voice filled the room, not raised, not dramatic, just steady. Lena froze. She stared at the screen. Then she looked at me. The laughter stopped. Ryan changed the subject so fast it felt practiced. My parents shifted in their seats. No one asked another question. I finished my drink, helped clear plates, and left early. Driving back to my place that night, the streetlights blurred across the windshield. I replayed the moment in my head, not with satisfaction, but with a strange clarity. They hadn't seen me, but they had heard me. When I got home, I put my keys on the counter, didn't turn on the lights, and stood there in the quiet. My phone buzzed once with a notification I didn't check. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and stared at an email that had come in earlier that afternoon. I hadn't answered it yet. Then I waited. The email had been sitting there all day. I'd seen the subject line when I checked my inbox that morning, flagged it automatically, then closed the tab like I always do when something feels too big to touch right away. That night, after Thanksgiving, I opened it again. The apartment was quiet except for the refrigerator clicking on and off. I took my coat off slowly, folded it over the back of the chair, and read the message from top to bottom without scrolling. It was from a production manager at a podcast network I'd heard of but never expected to hear from directly. They said they'd been following my work for a while. They referenced a recent episode. They asked if I'd be open to talking about a short-form series. No exclamation points, no hype, just logistics and interest. I closed the laptop without replying, not because I wasn't interested, because I needed a moment where no one needed anything from me. I poured a glass of water, leaned against the counter, and let the silence settle back in. People assume that if you work alone, quietly, you're doing it because you couldn't handle something louder, that you retreated, that you failed outward and folded inward. For me, it was the opposite. I like controlled environments, predictable systems, knowing exactly where my energy goes. I wake up early, I make the same coffee every morning. I write by hand before I ever touch a keyboard. My workday starts before most people check their phones. I don't tell my family that part. They think I record things, like it's a phase, like it's something I'll outgrow once I'm tired enough or embarrassed enough. Ryan once told me I'd understand adulthood when I had a boss. I didn't argue. I just stopped correcting him. The truth is, my work is quiet by design. I tell stories anonymously. No face, no real name. Just a voice that stays even no matter what the story carries. People listen while they drive, while they fold laundry, while they lie awake at night. They tell me things they don't tell anyone else. That Thanksgiving wasn't the first time my family laughed. It was just the first time they did it in front of someone who didn't already know the script. When Lena played that clip at the table, she didn't mean to expose anything. She just liked the voice, the tone, the way it made long roads feel shorter. She didn't know it belonged to the person they'd been dismissing for years. After dinner, no one followed up. No one texted to check if I got home safe. My mom sent a message the next day about leftovers. I didn't open it. Instead, I went back to my routine. The morning after Thanksgiving, Spokane was gray and still. I sat by the window with my notebook, wrote outlines, answered listener emails. One woman wrote about being mocked for leaving a corporate job to care for her sick mother. Another wrote about a brother who never missed a chance to joke at her expense. I changed names. I adjusted details. I kept the structure clean. Around mid-morning, I opened the email again. This time, I replied. I said I'd be open to a call. I gave availability windows. I kept it professional. I didn't mention Thanksgiving. I didn't mention my family. A few minutes later, another message came in. Different sender, different company. This one was from a brand strategist asking about a possible collaboration for the new year. She mentioned themes of self-respect and boundaries. She said she loved my work. Her name was Lena. I didn't react right away. I read it twice, then a third time. I put the phone face down on the desk. Then I waited. I didn't respond to Lena's email immediately, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to keep the order of things intact. I answered the network first. We scheduled a call for the following afternoon. Camera optional. Audio only, if I preferred. I preferred. The next day, I sat at my desk with my notebook open, a pen resting across the page even though I already knew what I was going to say. When the call connected, 3 voices came on the line. They introduced themselves, thanked me for my time, and referred to me only by my channel name. No one asked what I did for a living. No one laughed. They talked about process, release windows, listener retention, how my pacing worked well for longer arcs. They said one particular episode had triggered a noticeable spike in engagement, the Thanksgiving one. They proposed a limited series built around family expectations. 10 episodes, clear timelines, clear numbers, a contract they'd send after the call. I listened. I asked a few clarifying questions. I wrote down dates. When the call ended, I closed my notebook and sat there for a moment, hands folded, breathing steady. Then I opened Lena's email. Her message was warm but precise. She referenced a specific episode. She talked about brand alignment and audience trust. She suggested a short call to explore fit. She didn't mention Thanksgiving. She didn't mention dinner. I replied with availability. That week, I made a decision I hadn't made before. I went quiet with my family on purpose. No replies in the group chat. No follow-up questions. When my dad called and left a voicemail saying I shouldn't take jokes so seriously, I deleted it without listening twice. Instead, I documented everything. I saved emails. I downloaded analytics reports. I organized contracts into labeled folders. I printed the network proposal and slid it into a binder. I wasn't planning a confrontation, I was building structure. On Friday, I took the call with Lena's team. Her voice was the same as it had been at dinner. Calm, measured, professional. She talked about campaign themes and audience overlap. She said my work helped people feel less alone in complicated families. At one point, she mentioned an episode that made her stomach drop. The one where a father told his daughter not to embarrass him at a holiday table. I acknowledged it, briefly. I didn't tell her it was mine. After the call, the contract came through. Clean, detailed, numbers that didn't need exaggeration. I signed it with a pen, then scanned it back in. That night, I made dinner for one. I cleaned the kitchen. I laid out the next week on paper, recording sessions, editing windows, deadlines. I wasn't angry anymore. I was organized. The first episode of the new series went live quietly. No announcement to my family, no link shared. Just a scheduled release and a steady climb in listens. Comments started coming in. People recognizing themselves in the pauses, in the restraint, in the decision to stop explaining. I watched the numbers move the way I always do, without celebration, without fear. A few days later, my mom texted about Christmas plans. She mentioned Ryan. She mentioned Lena. She asked if I was coming. I didn't answer right away. I opened my calendar. I looked at the release dates. I checked the campaign timeline. Then I wrote back that I'd let her know. I closed the phone. Then I waited. By mid-December, everything had a place. Not emotionally, logistically. I stopped thinking in terms of reactions and started thinking in steps. Step 1 was distance. I limited contact with my family to neutral replies. Short, polite, no explanations. Silence, used carefully, creates room. Step 2 was documentation. Every contract lived in the same folder. Every payment confirmation was saved as a PDF. I kept timestamps, version numbers, and backup copies. Not because I expected a problem, but because order makes clarity easier when other people lose theirs. Step 3 was timing. I didn't rush anything. I let releases happen on schedule. I let numbers speak without commentary. I didn't announce wins. I didn't hint. I just worked. The series grew quietly. Each episode landed the same way. Steady, controlled, familiar. Listener messages shifted in tone. Less surprise, more recognition. People weren't reacting anymore. They were settling in. Lena's campaign materials came through in drafts. My narration layered over visuals I didn't need to see to understand. Scripts stayed clean, no slogans, no performance. She emailed once to confirm a line reading. Her message ended with, "Thank you again. This work matters." I replied with a simple confirmation. As Christmas approached, my parents' messages became more frequent. My mom asked about dates. My dad sent a thumbs-up emoji after I answered a logistics question. Ryan texted once. "Hey, all good?" I didn't respond. Not as punishment, as procedure. On the morning I finally decided to go home for Christmas dinner, I didn't feel nervous. I felt prepared. I printed one document and slid it into my bag. Not to show anyone, just to have it there. The house looked the same when I arrived. Same lights, same smells, same rhythm to the evening, familiar enough to be disarming. At the table, Ryan talked. My parents listened. Lena was quieter than before. She watched more than she spoke. When Ryan asked how my online thing was going, he smiled like he expected a line he'd heard before. I didn't answer immediately. I waited until Lena set her fork down. She looked at me, then at the TV in the corner of the room. And that's when I realized I wouldn't need the document after all. I leaned back in my chair, and I let the room move forward on its own. Lena stood up without rushing. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't look at Ryan first. She reached for the remote on the side table like she'd done it 100 times before and turned toward the television. "I actually want to show something," she said evenly. The screen changed from a muted holiday movie to a streaming homepage. A banner loaded across the top. Clean design, neutral colors, a title I recognized immediately. My parents leaned forward without realizing they were doing it. Lena pressed play. My voice filled the room. Not loud, not dramatic. The same tone I use every time. Calm, measured, familiar in a way that doesn't ask permission. My mom froze with her fork halfway to her mouth. My dad stared at the screen like he was trying to understand how it had ended up there. Ryan's smile disappeared first, then his color. Lena let it play for about 10 seconds before muting it. "This is the series I've been working on," she said. "The one I mentioned last month. It's one of the top performers on the platform right now." No one spoke. She turned slightly toward me. "Mara is the narrator." The silence wasn't dramatic. It was heavy, settled. My dad cleared his throat. "You mean this?" He gestured vaguely at the screen. "This is the thing you do?" "Yes," I said. One word, no explanation. Lena continued, still calm. "My company built our entire winter campaign around her work. It's been outperforming projections since week 1. Ryan laughed once. It came out wrong. "I mean, okay, but it's still just online stuff, right?" I didn't answer him. Lena did. "Our partners don't see it that way," she said. "Neither do the brands reviewing next year's budgets." That's when my dad finally looked at me. Really looked. Not like a child waiting to be corrected. Like someone realizing the room has shifted. "You never told us," my mom said quietly. "I tried," I said. My voice stayed level. "You laughed." Ryan leaned forward. "You could have said something. We were joking." "I did say something," I replied. "You called it a hobby." No one argued with that. They couldn't. The words were still sitting there, years old and unchanged. Lena glanced at Ryan, then back at my parents. "Do you know how many people listen to her every week?" Ryan shook his head once. Small. Automatic. "Millions," she said. "And they listen because she doesn't talk down to them." That landed harder than anything else. My dad opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. "I didn't mean—" "I know," I said. "That's the problem." I reached into my bag and placed the folded document on the table. I didn't slide it toward anyone. I didn't open it. "I didn't bring this to prove anything," I said. "I brought it in case I needed to remind myself why I stopped explaining." I stood up, pushed my chair in, and nodded once to my mom. "I'm going to step outside for a minute." No one stopped me. The cold air hit my face as soon as the door closed behind me. I stood on the porch, hands in my pockets, breathing slow. Inside, I could hear voices starting again. Lower now, unsteady. I didn't go far. I just waited. I stayed on the porch longer than I needed to. Not because I was avoiding anything, but because I wanted to let the conversation inside finish without me shaping it. Cold has a way of clearing your head. I focused on my breath. In, out, even. When I went back in, dessert was already on the table. Plates untouched. No one was laughing anymore. Ryan wouldn't meet my eyes. He kept adjusting his napkin, folding and unfolding it like it had instructions he couldn't follow. My dad sat back in his chair, hands flat on his thighs. My mom's shoulders were tense, but her voice was quieter when she spoke. "We didn't understand," she said, not defensively, just stating a fact. "I know," I replied. I took my seat again. I didn't reach for dessert. My dad nodded once. I was wrong about what counts as work. It wasn't an apology, but it was a correction. I accepted it as that. Ryan finally looked up. "So, this is actually serious." "Yes," I said. "It has been for a long time." He tried to smile. It didn't hold. "Guess I didn't realize." "That's also true," I said. Lena stayed quiet for the rest of the meal. She didn't need to add anything. The reality had already settled in, and everyone was adjusting to it in their own way. When dinner ended, I didn't linger. I hugged my mom, nodded to my dad, and picked up my coat. Ryan opened his mouth like he might say something else, then stopped. I drove back to Spokane the next morning before sunrise. A week later, the series numbers were finalized. The platform confirmed a second season. The campaign Lena worked on hit its year-end targets early. Ryan texted me once. "Congrats on everything." I replied, "Thank you." Nothing more. My parents sent an email together. My mom wrote most of it. She said they'd listened to the series. She said some episodes were uncomfortable. She said she recognized herself in a few places. My dad added a paragraph at the end. Short, direct. He said he was proud I could support myself doing something I built. I read it twice. Then I filed it in the same folder as everything else. Life didn't change overnight. It didn't need to. The next episode released on schedule. Listener messages came in like they always do. Quiet gratitude, familiar stories. I cleaned my apartment that evening, washed the mug I use every morning, set out my notebook for the next day. Order restored. And that was enough. A few months later, I moved. Not far. Just across town, into an apartment with an extra room and a door that closed. I set up my desk by the window. Same routine, same coffee, same notebook. The work didn't change. The space around it finally matched the way it had always felt in my head. My family and I stayed in light contact after that. Holiday texts, occasional check-ins, nothing forced, nothing performative. I visited once in the spring for an afternoon. We talked about neutral things, weather, traffic, a neighbor's dog. No one made jokes. Ryan sent a few messages over time, short ones. He asked vague questions about branding, about online stuff. I answered politely and generally. I didn't offer introductions. I didn't open doors I'd had to build myself. That wasn't bitterness. It was boundaries. The second season of the series rolled out without much fanfare. The campaign Lena worked on won an industry award. She emailed me a thank you note that was professional and kind. I replied the same way. Every now and then, I'd see a new listener message that felt familiar in a different way. Someone writing about a dinner table, a comment that mentioned a joke that went too far, a sentence about staying quiet because explaining never helped. Those messages always came late at night. I'd read them, make a note, and close the laptop. One evening, after finishing a recording session, I made tea and wiped down the counter while it steeped. The apartment was quiet. Outside, traffic moved in soft patterns I didn't need to follow. I sat down, took the first sip, and felt that steady sense of order settle back in. There was another email waiting. A listener asking if I could help shape a story about a sister who'd been written off for years. I flagged it, not for urgency, just for care. Some stories take time. And if any part of this sounded familiar to you, if you've ever been laughed at across a table or told to minimize yourself so others could feel comfortable, you're not alone. You don't have to prove anything in the moment. You don't have to convince anyone who's committed to misunderstanding you. You build your life, quietly, carefully, on your own terms. If you'd like to stay with me for more stories like this, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It helps this space grow. I'd also love to know where you're listening from, what city, and what time it is for you right now. I read those comments more than you might think. 2 more stories will be up next, and I'll be right here when you're ready to listen.